Vision Radio 345 in conversation.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm here speaking to Chuck. That's short for Chukwuemeka. A very, very strong. That Mecca at the end just make it powerful. You know? And from my understanding, you're a teacher.
Yes, indeed.
And I know that you, from what I know, you teach maths.
Very much so.
Okay. How long have you been doing that for?
I've been in the education system a total of 19 years. Maths in total about 10, and before that I was in the teaching technology. You know, so it's been interesting.
Great stuff. And apart from that, I know that you are a writer of books.
Very much so. I just published my 4th book last month, so it's been good going.
Okay. In fact, I've got one of them right here called "Who or What Am I to You?" I mean, I checked this out. I went round a friend's house. Probably you know him as well because we met there not so long ago. And before you actually came there, I checked one of your books and I was very interested in what was inside of the book. I spoke to one of your colleagues, and he said to me, "This guy writes a book." So I was really intrigued to find out what is inside of these books and how you came about writing them. So could you give us a brief explanation of how you came to write this particular book?
I guess the best word to choose for that is motivated by an experience I've had, because I currently work in a PRU, alternative provision, and regrettably one of my students is now currently serving a very long-term sentence. And reflecting on what happened, I was in a way frustrated that despite all the positive words you're trying to pass on to the young people there and trying to encourage them to do what's right, it's almost you're going around the same circle at times. So I thought, okay, what else can I do beyond talking to them in the classroom or in the corridors? How can I try and reach out to them, give them something to look at in their own time, and hopefully get them to reflect? And that's where the book came about. It's about values. What do we value in life?
Which is very, very important.
Yeah. You know? Yes, very much so.
Okay. And so just a bit more on that. So just, a bit more about the book.
Right. So it looks at both two sides of humanity in effect, or tries to look at two sides of humanity, and it actually wants the reader, the audience, to question, what are my values? And once you decide upon that, in a way, we act on what we see as a value. If we value good things, we tend to move in that direction. Okay, and obviously, I appreciate that a lot of it is to do with your experiences growing up.
That's right.
And what your parents are, or in effect, the community you're in, surrounds you with.
Right.
You see, so the book is actually broken down into 2 tiers. So first one looks at what in a way you could call the negative values of life, negativity of values, things like envy, hatred, the whole thing around the knife culture and so forth. And then the latter part of the book looks at the positive natures. So in short, in the book, there's the two sections are broken down by particular sentences. One says, if you looked at me, what would you see in terms of my value? That's one aspect. And then it goes into things like love and caring and empathy. That's the latter part of it. So it shows hopefully a whole spectrum of humanity.
Yes.
And which values control what we choose to do in life.
Wow. It's very deep. I mean, I skipped through a couple of pages. I'm like, each one of these pages could actually become an actual show within itself because there's so much information there. One of the things I want to ask you is, because you mentioned about something to do with knife crimes, exploring young people's emotional link to knives. How does that pan out? What information do you give out in the book when that reader reads that? What is it actually saying to them?
In a sense, it comes from, in writing, I tend to talk to a lot of my students. And one thing that's that's a center of my life in education is that I always have to be open to learn from the young people. So it's not it's not a one-way system.
Right.
Because obviously their experiences in a way enriches my life.
Right.
Okay. And if I understand where they're coming from, then I'll know how best to approach them.
Yes.
So they're telling me what experience I've had and why they feel the need to carry knives. So, for example, like I said earlier on, a book was motivated by a young man who's unfortunately serving a long sentence right now. And he actually said to me clearly in the classroom that he at one point had given up carrying knives.
Wow.
And he felt the need to carry the knife to defend himself. And in a way, that's one thing that continuously comes out from all the young people, this need to carry knives to defend themselves.
Yeah.
Though, sadly, the data seems to suggest that, in a way, when there's an attack, those knives they're carrying is what's used and turned upon them. And then the young man explained that he actually, from us talking to him and encouraging him and trying to get him to utilize his talents a lot more, he gave up carrying out knives. Sadly, people were coming up to him realizing that he wasn't carrying a knife, so he got fed up and said, I'm going to bring my knife back out again.
Right.
And then that led to the negative incidents that unfortunately resulted in him being where he is right now.
As I said, there's so much content in the book. And one of the things that I probably look at, especially work with young people myself, is that the fact that the young people don't have the skills to deal with conflict. I think that's the issue. When something happens and it arises, at that split second, there's no sense of reason. It goes from 0 to 100 in a moment. And like yourself, I speak to young people in the school where I'm at, and they would say in that conversation or that kind of scenario, they don't business. This is what we're hearing, because it's like dog eat dog out there. But as I said to these guys, at the end of the day, you're actually wiping out your own generation. So there's a lot of work to be done, and I believe that there's some very good, powerful quotes and segments in that book which will have a huge impact on young people based on what you've just told me, because obviously you're writing it from their experience as well, but also collating from your own life's experiences and bringing that into a book format, which hopefully, by holding small conversations, this could be a huge thing for somebody who's in a space where they're not comfortable right now. They feel that they've lost a way in life.
Yeah, well, that was my hope and my intention in writing the book. Actually, I wrote it in a way to reflect the kind of medium they like to access now. So quite often, a lot of my students like to listen to grime music and so forth. So very short raps, statements. So the book is written that way because I recognize as well, one of the issues is that they generally don't like to read a lot. So if you keep it short and snappy, so it's almost written like a poem in effect.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So very short paragraphs, 1-2 pages done. But the words, some of the words rhyme, so they could kind of relate to that. And that's what I was hoping to encourage them to read it. And certainly the students I were given the books to write actually loved it and took it away home and wanted copies, which I did give out to them. And actually I would like to say at this point, there'll be opportunities later on for those interested to get some copies, and I'll let you know how to do that.
Okay, brilliant. So in effect, they've taken the book, they've gone home with it, they've had a skim through a couple of, and something just sprung out in front of them, and they're now using that information there to make a change within themselves. Yes,
which, to be honest, I was very happy that that effect was happening, because normally things take a while for you to see change to happen. And certainly it was more impactful than me just talking to them. So though they like the banter in the classroom, in a sense, it's like, oh, you're just a teacher talking. But when they take the contents away, the book away, and read in their own time, in their own space, they've come back and said, well, actually they could see a bit of my life, a bit of their own lives in there. And there's a realization that actually this is what happens in my community or in my street, or I've experienced it, or definitely know one person's happened to some extent. Reflecting back, I shouldn't have been too surprised, because like I said, the book came from talking to the young people and recognizing what's going on in their lives, and wrote it in a way for them to reflect on, well, if this is happening, what if you looked at it this way, and for them to draw empathy. But critically, again, comes down to, what are your values? What are your values?
Yes.
Because sadly, so many young people now don't have that parental input, or so we say mentorship that says, okay, look, you need to be doing this or you need not to be doing that. So they take their values from what they see from the internet or from what their purely the social groups gives them. Yeah.
And I'm looking through the book. There's some really good stuff in there. I mean, I've just come across this. If I was the best that I could be, what would define me? That's like a conversation within itself.
It is.
That is a serious one. If I was the best I could be, now imagine talking to a young person who doesn't even know what his best is, and he poses that question. If I was the best that I could be, what would define me? He's answering the question himself. Is that?
Yeah.
It's very. Explain that to me because it's very.
Well, you see that's actually the beginning section of this. Like I said to you, the book is written in two halves. One about positive values, so that's the beginning of it to start that conversation about what are the positive values. So, like I said, the first half looking at in a sense, this is what I'm currently doing or may currently be doing.
Yeah.
If I'm not doing the things that in a way society values or seen as positiveness, then looking through it says, well, actually I like this, or this is what I should be doing, this is what it looks like. Because when you're reading something, you take time to process it. But if you're just hearing my words talking to you, sometimes it goes in one ear and come out the other ear.
That's if they can process it. Because that's the other thing.
That's another challenge in itself.
Yeah, but it's still powerful because the words stick out. I mean, every time I've looked on a page in the book, at the bottom you've got in bold letters or at the top, I am your call for courage. I mean, these are profound sayings. I mean, they're like...
Yes, you see, what you just teased that showed up now is like, from the very title, it says, who or what am I to you? So until you read the chapter,
yes,
it's written away to try and get the audience to try and figure out what is it asking me. Then by the end, it then tells you what it is actually about. And then for you to say, okay, did I actually come to that conclusion? Or because if it's something that's written up, like you could see that yourself in that. You could almost reason straight away, actually, I know what he's talking about here. And if you haven't experienced it before, or there's a lack of, say, for example, imagine a child that's neglected and hasn't experienced love.
Yes.
Reading through the words, you get to, this is what it could possibly look like.
Right.
Yeah. Right. This is what empathy should look like. So if I see a next person, I'm not just going like, I'm taking your watch from you. I could start thinking, okay, well, actually, I remember those words. And this is what I should do in regards to relating to them. Yeah.
And that comes along with the same thing, talking about the values, the respect, and all those kind of things that because they started. That's the type of world we're living in. The kids will just rob people, and they don't care who it is, as long as they get what they need to get. I mean, just the other day, a family member of mine, we got a call that he was robbed in the middle of the night. This was a couple of days ago. At knife point, the guys thought he had money. Thank God nothing drastic never happened because it was in the night time. The kids were sleeping. He's got young children there. They just thought he had money. They came in there. And to be honest with you, these guys are just as frightened as the person who they're holding up. Some of them are, because once they don't get that reaction, there wasn't any altercation or anything. But eventually, thank God that they just left and nobody was to harm. But he had to report that. But could you imagine going through that kind of thing? So these are the things that I think this book, because there's a load of topics in it, and there's a load of little short sayings and words that are mind-provoking to the young person who thinks that he has no value. This will probably wake him up and, as you say, self-reflect.
I like what you just said now, because just yesterday I was at a wedding nearby the Excel Centre.
Yeah.
And there's something that came up. So the bride, people were coming up to give speeches.
Yeah.
And one of the things that came up about the bride a lot was that she taught her friends their self-worth.
Okay.
So this is a very, very, I was quite impressed. It was a very young person, but again, a teacher, right? SLT, senior leadership. So has mentored a number of teachers, young teachers. And all of them said that they came into the education system nervous, but she took them on board and nurtured them. But critically, she taught them their self-worth.
Right.
And they're at that point in their lives, they were saying yesterday, they would not take anything less. So if a young person hasn't had opportunity to learn their self-worth, again, going back to what the values parents often, or your guardians bring to you, and if you're not getting that, you're just getting what you have in the streets or the internet and so forth.
Yeah.
Then it becomes difficult for them to understand this is wrong or this is right. It's just, well, this is the system I find myself in, and I'm going to it becomes a just take kind of mindset, you know. And that's what where I'm not saying to them, this is right and wrong. The book is just written in a way. Here are the set of values. Look through it, see which values you're operating on, and see which values you could possibly operate on to bring out a better person yourself, to be the kind of person you like other people to be able to approach and ask for that mentorship for yourself, in a way, figure out what your self-worth.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think that's the hardest thing for them to do, because in the context of that, I think it depends on which child you have in front of you, because there are so many layers, and it's breaking down those layers and getting to because really initially our work is to get to the heart.
Yeah.
And it's going to take some time for us to take those layers down and get to the real person, so they can be the person they're supposed to be. Like, this is who you're supposed to be. And as we know, a lot of them are walking around with masks on, and they're not them. You can see they're not themselves. I mean, you know that through experience work with young people. When somebody's been, you think, well, you're not that guy. So why are you over there, innit? Like, why are you doing that? It's like the two that I mentioned before. I'm not going to mention his name.
Yeah.
But he was just not that guy. He's the one who sadly got into an altercation at school and had to be sent to to an off-site provision. But he was totally not that guy. And some of it is to do with the ego, like I said, the social media, how he's supposed to be perceived as. All these things just distort and don't deal with reality of young people.
It's a sad thing. I mean, you see, like again I said, the book never tries to criticize. And being in education, you learn very quickly. You never get anywhere if you try to criticize anybody. Because one of the things I point out is that as a teacher, I mean, certainly looking at where I was brought up, the education system I grew up in, teachers could criticize you every day and you can't say nothing back to them.
Right.
Whereas in this day and age, a child could criticize you as much. So if you're both going down the path of criticism and argument, you're not going to get anywhere. And again, looking at the environment, which is the alternative provision, some of the students are very bright, like A-star students, but clearly they're not there for academic reasons. So it's a whole lot of emotional things, and sadly, if you look, like you said, it's so many layers. If you start going through the layers, you realise there is a social issues involved there.
Absolutely.
I could think of two students who really the core issue is just we don't get enough food at home, so I'm not going to engage with you at all. So no matter how many words, but interestingly enough, when they're away and they sit down and they think about what's happened, slowly, it takes time. Like relationships, it takes time.
And, I think you're absolutely right there, Chop, because I had a student come in and it was, we start school at 8:30. They've got to be in Lance by 8:35. You see them coming through the gate. I stand literally along the walkway where they come in, so I see them coming in. And this particular student, he was vexed. This time, like, it's not even time to start lessons and you're vexed already. So I said to him, what's up? No breakfast. So I get it. Meeting the basic need is the start. And some of them don't have that basic need. So when they come into school, sometimes they don't know if they've actually eaten for the last 2 or 3 days. I've had kids come to me and say to me, sir, I'm hungry. Okay, let's go and get something to eat. But then that flags up something to me like, why aren't you eating in the morning? So I get that. There's as I said, there's layers and there's different situations and scenarios. But again, that book will bring out something in that child to either open up and speak about certain things or start a positive discussion with their parents, because all these things that are in the book that you have leads to that. And I think that's the conversation that some parents actually need to have. Yeah.
I mean, beyond just parents, like in the school, one of the issues I find we have a lot of mentors.
Yeah.
But it's something you said interestingly at the beginning about their communication skills. They have things in their heads they want to express, but don't have the words to express it.
Yeah,
so
that's a very common one, isn't it?
It's true. It's again, that's a whole new topic.
That is something else, Chuck, I'm telling you.
But my hope is in terms of talking to the young people first before writing this. I wrote it in a way they can respond so that they could pick up questions from it they could ask a mentor in school.
Right.
You see, but it's again, I found the ones that have read it quickly came back throwing so many, because they want answers to questions that may be in pilot for years, and they want answers like in 10 minutes.
So they found the answer in the book.
Yeah, or, you know. So could you give me just throw questions, like literally questions that come out from them.
And they want to confirm.
Could you confirm this? Why did you do this? What, like, okay, are you right about it? One child actually thought that I wrote it about them specifically. You know, which was like very interesting.
The book speaking to me, like, how do you know?
Yeah. I mean, if you read the feedback at the commentary, one commentary right at the back there.
Oh, this one?
Yeah. If you read that, it says what it says there.
Oh, okay. I listened to this book. I heard about my past. I heard about my present. I saw my future. I love this book because emotions were opened in me.
So that's what somebody who read the book said, and I was actually quite I don't know the best word to use there, captivated, if you say, about that kind of feedback. I thought, wow, for me that was really powerful, and I thought, okay, wow. I love people to see that, and that's why I put it at the back of the book. Yeah, you see. It's more powerful than me writing what the book is about, in a sense.
Chuck, you know what? I'm really pleased to have you on this podcast, because it's very, very interesting. I mean, if this is just one book, I could imagine what the other. It's the fourth one now, right? You do?
Yeah, fourth one just published.
The other two. What's the other two about?
So the first one was really my initial. This goes back like 2012. So it looks at my first, in a sense, 5 years in education and the challenges I had.
Yeah.
So like I said early on, the education system I grew up in is teachers talking, keep quiet. Do you understand?
Okay.
Right. So in my head, when I first came into the classroom, that's my vision of what school, my expectations were. But what I got were students basically behaving like the teachers were in charge of the environment. That really threw me off. So that was the first one. Second one was like, okay, now I'm experienced. I now know how to address them. Yeah. So in that sense, the first book is actually written to people who want to get into the education system, teaching assistants. Right. Whereas this one is looking at values, but the last one is, again, goes back to teachers to recognize those students sitting in front of you come to you with a whole raft of challenges in their personal life. And until you see that, you're going to be having conflict with them.
You have conflict with them.
And sadly, that's why we're having a lot of students being excluded from schools, because schools don't have time to look at who's that child. They're just thinking, I'm here to throw academic contents at you. You absorb it and regurgitate it in exam, and done. I'm done my bit.
Wow. So as I said, I mean, that was a couple of pages I flicked through, and obviously the back we've just read, confirming it from the person who wrote that. So where do we go from here with your next book? When is that actually coming out?
Oh, that's what I'm saying. The fourth one had just been published last month.
Right.
Literally last month. Yeah.
And where can they pick up? Where can they get your book?
All my books are available. I guess they're all on Amazon.
Right.
Okay. But I guess the best way where you can see all of them is on my website.
Right.
Which is www.ekeowa.com. That's EKEOWA.com. /books, but the website really. So you could click on each book. It tells you a little snapshot about what this book's about, and you click on it, it takes you to Amazon. You can read a bit more about it and so forth.
Okay.
And I certainly, if anybody does that, I would certainly love always like feedback.
Yeah.
It's another layer of conversation.
Yeah.
So I know how to improve on my writing at every level.
Yeah, I think whoever's listening, I think it'd be great if you could actually give us some feedback on the books. I mean, from what I've saw so far, I think it's excellent, and I think that it's going to be a good times for you in these books. I think you've got a bestseller coming along here somewhere along the line. What I'd like to do is obviously if you've got any copies available, I can definitely hand them out and work something around that, because I think it's really interesting that you've got not just one but a few books out at the moment, and it'd be interesting to find out a bit more about the rest of the books then. Yeah,
certainly. I mean, I guess the audience could contact you direct for the copies.
Yeah.
Alternatively, if they want to go through me directly, then again you could go to ekeowa.com /contacts and put a request through the contact page, fill out the form.
Yeah.
and say what it is for. And I'm happy to forward out some of the copies I have in regards. And again, even with the most recent book, I'm happy to give it out to get feedback. So it's all about improving the conversation and the communication, and how we could better educate and nurture young people.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Listen, Chuck, thank you very much for coming. It's been a pleasure having you here.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been awesome.
Do you know what? This has been, wow. I'm gonna go and look at the other books and find out what's going on, because if this book is like this, you've already explained to me the impact that it's had on some young people when they've actually opened it. I mean, if a book speaks to you on the first page or whatever, must be saying something going on there. There's impact happening. Yeah, great stuff. We'll definitely have to have you on our show again.
Yeah, I'd be really grateful to come back and share some more words with our audience. Yeah?
Thank you very much.
Thank you indeed.
Great.
Really appreciate it.
To leave your comments or views about any of our podcast episodes, go to visionradio345@gmail.com.